Good morning, everyone. Good morning again. I'm Hajar Kouriani, a young Moroccan with agriculture engineering background, and I'm the representative of the International Association of Students in Agriculture and Related Sciences, the biggest youth association with presence in more than 50 countries. We are now on the ninth day of this essential conference, united in our mission to defend our planet and make it a healthier and more resilient world for future generations. Today, we gather for the critical discussion on adaptation strategies for climate change and mitigation approaches to reduce biodiversity loss in the ocean. This panel discussed on the pressing impacts of climate change on our oceans, which cover over 70% of the Earth's surface and play a fundamental role in maintaining global diversity and environmental stability. As climate-related pressures, such as rising temperatures, acidification, habitat loss, and the decline of marine biodiversity accelerate, the threat to our oceans are reaching unprecedented levels. This panel will cover several key points: the failure of current adaptation strategies and the lessons they offer, the role of youth in advocating for ocean climate policies, striking coastal resilience through community-led efforts, and the critical role of youth organization in protecting endangered marine species. Throughout these discussions, we hope to bring visibility to specific region challenges, promote integrated strategies that combine scientific knowledge with local initiatives, and inspire collaborative action. Before starting, on behalf of the International Association of Students in Agricultural and Related Sciences, I extend my gratitude to the North Forum and the Arctic Pavilion for their support in allowing us to present critical youth voice. Your support and collaboration are so appreciated. With this context in mind, let's turn to our estimated panelist expert who will guide us deeper into these urgent topics. Joining us today, we have Himalati. She's a searcher and academician working in the intersection of climate change and law. She is the founder and director of the Enact Earth Foundation since 2021 to foster a climate resilience and justice society. Through the foundation, her work focused on climate literacy, intergeneration equity, gender and participatory justice. She currently serves as a council member of the Loss and Damage Youth Grant, making council supporting youth, lead projects to address loss and damage. We are also joined by Mr. Mark Harver, as a leader at the forefront of the movement of ocean climate action. His consulting firm, Blue Green Generation, supercharges the impact of champions for the ocean, climate, and sustainability fashion. He has led the Sustainable Ocean Alliance delegates to COP since COP26. Mark has spoken at the plenary of the first ever Ocean Climate Dialogue and moderates the second dialogue in person during the UNFSS semi-annual SB intersections. He has been involved in the creation of significant ocean climate initiatives such as the ocean breakthrough and the coastal tourism breakthrough. And at COP29, Mark is hoping to lead youth engagement, the ocean climate finance nexus. Our next panelist is Jang Wona, is a student of forestry and climate environmental big data in Korea. Currently, he serves as the UNSBD Commissioner for IFSA, the International Forestry Students Association, and recently participated in the UNSBD COP 16 in Colombia. In November, John Woo began an internship in the FAO headquartered in Rome, working with the Fire Management Hub. He also attended COP 29 as a representative of IFSA and Korea NGO Climate Change Center, looking forward to contributing to meaningful discussion on climate adaptation and biodiversity conversation. So welcome all, and thank you for accepting our invitation. So we cannot wait more to hear from our panelists. And the first, Mrs. Himalati, could you speak to us about the failure of adaptation strategies? What do you see as the main challenges, and how can we address these failures moving forward?
Thank you so much for having me here. Okay, so most of our work on climate change, and especially in the climate space, the conversations always started around mitigating climate change and, eventually moved to adapting to climate change itself. But there was always this narrative where we spoke as if we are going to be successful at everything that we try, right? Let's do this, let's mitigate emissions, and then we're going to be successful, or let's try to adapt to these impacts of climate change and we're going to be successful. At least that's what the assumption with which we started taking the actions we took. Many a times we fail to understand and consider what happens if we fail and what are the consequences of such failures, especially at a very local level. And we also call this maladaptation sometimes. Even if your purpose is exceptionally good in terms of helping communities and engaging with them and supporting them and helping them become more resilient to climate change, even with the best of intentions, you can, try end up harming the community and the environment even more unless you're like actually better prepared to deal with the unintended consequences of your adaptation itself. It's something as similar as, would you plant trees, to mitigate and deal with more carbon absorption in an area where there are frequent forest fires? What is the point? And if there is a forest fire, it only ends up releasing more carbon into the atmosphere than, helping mitigate climate change. So these are, and or like you're trying to help communities upstream dealing with water issues due to the climate crisis. You're helping upstream communities, but then, communities that are reliant on the same water downstream are eventually impacted. So these are like very, you know, some smallest specific examples of how we have to think through our adaptation strategies, especially at the local level, and ensure that there is a holistic approach that is taken up to, and we shouldn't necessarily be looking at adaptation and silos itself. Even when it comes to agriculture, there are a lot of cases where rice varieties are basically planted in coastal areas because they're tolerant to, salt, seawater intrusion, being able to deal with salt water. But after a point of time, trying to adapt using these rice varieties that does not exist in coastal areas, after a point of time, these rice varieties stop being resistant to salt water itself. They start being impacted, so you can't necessarily consume them. So you're looking at helping farmers adapt here, but then ultimately you have unintended consequences, which is again impacting their livelihoods itself. So when you're looking at forming adaptation strategies, there's always this thing called precautionary principle, even under the Rio Convention or the Stockholm Conference. And it basically says, do not take action when there is scientific uncertainty itself. So unless you know the consequences of the actions that you're taking when it comes to climate change, it is better to not take action in the first place rather than go ahead with something that you don't know consequences about. Because the consequences could be more damaging than climate change itself when you don't prepare your strategies well. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Mr., for your perspectives. And now let's welcome our fourth panelist, Mrs. Petronella Shengena. Is from Zambia. She holds the BS in Bachelor in Environmental Engineering and is currently pursuing a master degree in water engineering under an African Union scholarship. Her research interest focuses on the impact of climate change on water security in sub-Saharan Africa. Welcome there. And now let's move to our next panelist, Mr. Mark Harver. I'd love for you to share your insights on youth engagement and policy advocacy for ocean climate action, and how can young people play a pivotal role in shaping ocean policies and driving action at local and global levels.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I want to thank you all for being here in the audience today and being part of this panel. I want to thank you so much to Kevin and Hajar for inviting us to be part of this. And I want to thank my amazing panelists for sharing their thoughts today. My name is Mark Haver, and I'm really excited to be able to share with you what are the different ways that young people can engage with respect to ocean climate action, because even though I have 8 minutes, there are so many different ways that we can take this question, right? So one of the things that motivated me to get involved in the UNFCCC system and process was when I created the first youth policy program with Sustainable Ocean Alliance. Sustainable Ocean Alliance, SOA, is one of the world's largest networks of young ocean leaders. And when I was in college, I was really inspired by some of the climate movement happenings 5-6 years ago, where there was the Green New Deal. There were these 2 members of Congress from the United States that were putting together this ambitious policy framework for the US and our climate future called the Green New Deal. It was very ambitious, it was a vision, and it inspired a lot of public activism and a lot of conversation about the climate crisis. And it was really cool to see people rally around this common vision. But then I thought about myself and my engagement with the ocean community, and I wondered, what was the rallying, united voice and call to action from young people for ocean action? And so that motivated me to create the Global Blue New Deal, which was a crowdsourced, youth-led ocean and climate policy framework that had integrated more than 1,000 opinions from young people to create this document that basically was guidance for policymakers to understand what youth want to see for our collective ocean and climate future. Not just with respect to reducing carbon emissions, not just with respect to protecting biodiversity or ensuring that we have sustainable blue foods, but also in reforming ocean governance at large. So I was really excited to take this Global Blue New Deal to COP26, my first COP. And since then, we've seen a number of other ways in which young people have come together to affirm what their common calls to action are for ocean and climate. And so we have these different documents like the Global Youth Statement that's produced by Youngo. Hopefully we're all familiar with that already. And this serves as a way for the different working groups of Youngo to integrate their different policy positions into something that we can present at the UNFCCC to our national delegations and our LCOIs and our ARCOIs, whatever it may be, right? And Ocean's Voice, as the ocean-focused working group of Youngo, contributes to that global youth statement, ensures that there are ways in which that's integrated, the ocean calls to action are integrated into what we advocate for together. So there's that. And now there was even, if you guys are familiar, there's the UN Ocean Conference, and that is supposed to happen every 3 years. And so we recently had a UN Ocean Conference in Portugal in 2022. And in 2025, we have the UN Ocean Conference in Nice, France. And it's co-hosted by the government of Costa Rica. This is 2024, the year before the UN Ocean Conference next year. And they had a Latino America Azul conference in Costa Rica. And there, they actually had this whole gathering of young people from across Latin America and the Caribbean, and they put together their own declaration as well for what these ocean climate policy positions are, what they want to see come of the UN Ocean Conference. So it's really cool to see all these different youth networks create their own guides, and hopefully because of the integration, I mean, we all wear multiple hats, right? Like not only am I part of SOA, but I'm part of the Youngo Oceans Voice. I'm trying to coordinate with the UN Ocean Decade ECOP program. So hopefully there's some through line, right, between these different policy statements that are created. But let me be open and honest with you all right now. We are not really that coordinated at the UNFCCC for ocean climate action as young people. Straight up. And that's not necessarily just our fault. Okay? The thing is that this is kind of off the record, but the ocean climate community at large really lacks the capacity to coordinate and communicate effectively for us to be a strategic and effective coalition at this conference. The youth movement itself is incredible. We've been able to see how the ocean and youth movement progress has tracked against each other since COP26. Since COP26, the youth movement has taken over. We've been able to go from acknowledging that youth are important and should be involved into decision making to having an institutionalized office, the Presidency Youth Climate Champion, within each COP presidency that officially works on the inclusion of youth, meaningful youth engagement, capacity building for young people to engage at the UNFCCC, links them with their delegations, and liaises with parties to ensure that they're advocating and including youth meaningfully. That's a lot. That's a lot. And we can all give ourselves a round of applause for being able to make that progress, right? With the ocean, we've established an ocean climate dialogue. So we have these parties that come together every June, SB session, and it's basically this opportunity for the countries to come together and say, here are the issues we want to talk about with respect to how to advance the ocean climate nexus at the UNFCCC, and here are some examples and case studies of how we've done this well within our NDCs, within our national strategies with the ocean, et cetera. That's great, but then they produce this informal summary report that comes out like a month before COP. They have one side event, and the countries who come are the countries who are already ocean champions anyway. I'm sorry, but it's not working. The ocean-based climate solutions can reduce the emissions gap by 35%. That's crazy, right? That's a lot. And the ocean is our climate. The climate is our ocean. Ocean action is climate action. Ocean justice is climate justice. But the negotiators here are having the ocean as an afterthought, right? So we need to understand what we can do, acknowledging that there's a lack of capacity for the ocean climate community at large to be able to create effective coalitions and campaigns to advance strategic ocean climate action here at the UN, at UN Climate Change. And so going back to youth engagement at Ocean Climate Nexus, I believe that we have a really cool opportunity ahead of COP30, right? February next year, what's going to happen? Hopefully all these parties are going to submit an updated round of NDCs, their nationally determined contributions, and hopefully they'll submit their national adaptation plan updates as well, right? There are different ways in which we as young people can advocate for ocean climate adaptation. Yes, as I mentioned, ocean-based climate solutions can be for mitigation, but they also can be for adaptation, right? I'm looking at protecting blue carbon ecosystems. Blue carbon ecosystems are so vital, especially when we recognize how they protect against storm surge and the co-benefits of nature at large with respect to adaptation. I'm looking at advancing marine protected areas. Ocean acidification is a huge problem and it barely gets mentioned at the UN. Crazy, not good. This is something that is really problematic because we have what ocean acidification we've already caused. It's not going to get better until 10,000 years from now, unless we come up with some magic solution that we don't have yet. So we need to understand how Protecting blue carbon and advancing marine protected areas are some of these ways where we can have these adaptation solutions to these pressing ocean climate impacts like ocean acidification. We need to protect coastal communities and their infrastructure from these different disasters. There's all different types of adaptation solutions that we as young people can band together for in our national coalitions to advocate for their inclusion in this new round of NDCs and national adaptation plans. So as we as a community try and figure out how we as young people are able to develop capacity to engage with these ocean climate legacy partners at the Ocean Climate Nexus, we can still do a lot of the work on the ground within our national communities. I think there's a lot of work that we can do to also emphasize that it's not necessarily us catching up, but it's also us setting the vision for the future. Our next speaker, he's going to talk about coastal forests. And how many times are we like commodifying ecosystems where we're talking about coastal forests and their value based on how they help us in the climate crisis? My first thought when I thought about coastal forests, I'm like, coastal forests are gorgeous. They're so cool. They are such a special ecosystem. They protect such valuable species. There's this link between wellness. I want to go to a coastal forest right now instead of being at COP29. You know, obviously we're here for good cause and it's an incredible privilege to be here. But I think we all recognize as the youngest generation that we do not need to commodify these natural resources, right? We have the opportunity to completely change our relationship with nature. And if we expect to escape the climate crisis with our future intact, we know that we do not need to continue as business as usual. We can set a vision for how we change our dynamics with nature and our planet at large. And so being able to recognize the value of coastal forests as a valuable commodity in the climate crisis is important, but we also need to recognize that we need to go beyond that for larger systemic change. I went over time, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mark, for your perspective. I really appreciate your approaches, and your words are really inspiring and motivated. And now let's move to John Wonak. Could you please tell us about strengthening coastal resilience through community-led adaptation strategies? What are some successful examples or strategies that have empowered communities in adaptation to climate change impacts on their coastlines?
Hello, so my name is Jung Woon from South Korea, and I am majoring in forestry and also climate environmental big data. And I am also an intern at the FAO headquarter with the Global Fire Management Hub. And I wanted to talk when I got the question. I want to talk about two things: coastal forests and mangrove. It's a very big issue in forestry field, and it's also important because it's very related to community efforts, like local levels. And if I give you a brief explanation about mangroves, it's a salt-tolerant trees and shrubs growing in coastal areas, forming unique ecosystem vital for both marine and territorial areas. And I think these two ecosystems play a role in climate change adaptation and coastal restoration. So as a forestry student perspective, these two ecosystems serve a unique function at the both land and marine systems and contributing to livelihoods of the local communities and reducing like disaster risk and stuff, because that is one of the main issues of coastal forests. And I want to give 4 points about my perspective. And the first thing is that for coastal forests and mangroves act as a natural barrier. So it reduces natural disasters such as flood, tsunamis, or typhoon. And it also contributes to climate change mitigation, carbon. So by storage in carbon, um, for example, mangrove is a highly efficient carbon sequestration in referred by the blue carbons. And second thing is that coastal forests and mangroves is a hotspot for biodiversity. It provides habitats for not just human, but also various species and marine ecosystems. And it also provides a sustainable livelihood to local communities, such as fishing or timber harvesting in those areas. And the third thing is that I think it's kind of unique that community-based restoration and management are highly effective. It is proved. And as a forestry student, I have learned and heard that local community participation and traditional knowledge is quite important and is as vital as scientific researches and approaches in preserving ecosystems. If I give you an example, there are successful mangrove restoration projects led by the community in Indonesia and Philippines. And the last thing I want to talk about youth, the role of youth. The role of youth, I think it lies on driving innovative solutions and raising awareness. During my studies, I have witnessed inspiring youth-led initiatives, such as, for example, there are technology-based researches in mangrove restoration in mangrove monitoring. It uses like satellite data and technology and kind of innovative technologies. And the second thing is drone-assisted seed dispersal is also very led by youth like researchers right now. And I think these providing new paradigms in coastal forest restorations. And in conclusion, as a forestry student, I want to emphasize the multifaceted value of coastal forests and mangroves. There are very successful examples of coastal ecosystem restoration with that youth and community have collaborated with. And I think leveraging both innovative and traditional approaches by youth and local communities is quite crucial. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zhang, for your words. It was really interesting hearing about your perspectives and your own experiences as a forestry students. So now, finally, let's move to our last panelist, Mrs. Petronella. We are eager to hear your perspective on the role of youth organization in protecting endangered marine species. How can youth-derived organizations make a significant impact in marine conservation conversations, especially in protecting species at a risk? Okay, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and I'm excited to be among this panel. So first of all, I would love to talk about the significance of oceans in the fight against climate change. So we all know that climate change, oceans have the ability to absorb and store carbon in large quantities. So it's very important for you and me to take that responsibility to protect oceans. So oceans are also habitats for many aquatic organisms. So it's very important for youth to be involved in the protection of the endangered marine organisms. Why? Because youths bring fresh perspectives, and youths are also very energetic. So they play a very key role in protecting marine and aquatic organisms. So how can youth organizations participate? How can youth organizations participate in protecting endangered marine species? So they can participate through wetland restoration, such as protection of mangroves, like my colleague has already mentioned of the importance of mangroves in flood control, in fighting soil erosion. So youth organizations can also involve themselves in tree planting. So tree planting of the coastal areas. So the other way that youth organizations can participate is through capacity building sessions. So youth organizations are made up of youths. So it's very important that the members of those organizations are equipped with the right kind of knowledge. So this is done through capacity buildings. You know, when you are equipped with the right kind of information, you'll be able to know how to sensitize to the next person, how to sensitize to those communities that are found in the coastal regions, and also how to sensitize in universities and also in schools. So youth organizations should ensure that the members of those organizations are equipped with the right kind of knowledge. So this sensitization and capacity building is done through having webinars, and then the youths can also have online courses so that you are equipped with the right kind of information. And then another way that youth organizations can be very effective is through educating the local coastal communities on the importance of marine biodiversity, because not everyone who lives in the coastal areas know the importance of marine biodiversity. So it's very important for youth organizations to conduct training of those communities. Okay, so the other thing is also through training of the local communities, specifically those who are who are in the coastal regions, training them about the proper waste disposal, because when they are taught right about a proper means of waste disposal, it's most likely that the waste is not going to end up in the ocean. They're going to dispose it in the right way. Still talking about the waste disposal, I will also talk about plastic pollution. If people are not aware, if people are not properly informed, they're going to litter around the coastal area, and these plastics are going to end up in the ocean. And we all know the effects of plastics. When these plastics end up in the ocean, they end up, suffocating the aquatic organisms. They end up entangling the aquatic organisms. And when those aquatic organisms are affected, they end up dying. So it's very important that the local communities are taught about proper means of waste disposal. The other way is also, as youth organizations, it's very important for us to champion biodegradable plastics or biodegradable packaging in terms of plastic bags, plastic bottles. It's very important for us to have biodegradable materials, because we know these kind of materials are able to degrade, and they are not able to affect the aquatic organisms as compared to the synthetic plastics. Okay. Then the other thing is, we all know that plastics in the long run, they are able to break down and form microplastics. And these microplastics will end up being part of the food chain. So when these microplastics break down and they are part of the food chain, they will still come back and harm you and I as human beings, and they will affect our health. So as youth organizations, it's very important for us to champion against the use of plastics. Okay. And then the other point that I want to talk about is also for youth organizations to partner with environmental organizations that look at, in short, we partner with environmental organizations to ensure that industries are able to, the wastewater that industries end up disposing in our oceans and our seas are in the right recommended limits. Because we know that when wastewater contains some pollutants which can affect aquatic organisms. So it's very important for that wastewater to be in the right limits, which cannot have an impact on the aquatic and the marine species. Okay, so another way that we can participate as youth organizations is also by discouraging farming activities near our oceans and near our seas. This is because the use of fertilizers and pesticides in our farms, when it rains, those fertilizers, those pesticides are going to be washed down into the oceans. And these are very harmful to those organisms that are found in the oceans, and they'll be able to lead to things such as, fish kills, and the aquatic organisms are going to, they're going to be killed, and they're going to be reduced in number. So it's very important to discourage farming activities around coastal regions. So, yeah. So the other thing is also to partner with educational institutions in order to include courses to do with marine biodiversity in the school curriculum. It's very important, when children are taught from a young age on the importance of marine conservation. They are going to be responsible people, and they will know the role to play. They will know the role to play in the protection of marine biodiversity. So it's very important that as youth organizations, we partner with different educational institutions in order to include marine biodiversity in the curriculum. So we can also, as youth organizations, we can also involve ourselves in beach cleaning activities. So I'll give an example, like the organization that I'm under as a master's student, we have periodic beach cleaning activities where as youths we involve ourselves in cleaning the beach, and we do this in collaboration with the local communities. And this is also a way of sensitization to the local communities. Yeah, so youth should also be involved in decision making at different levels, such as the community level, the national level, and also at the global stage. So because for the youth, when you are well informed, you'll be able to participate in policy and in decision making. Then youth organizations can also lobby for funding, because without funding, some of these activities cannot take place successfully. So youth organizations can also lobby for funding to ensure that they have enough funding to enable them carry out some of these activities successfully. So, like one of my colleagues here has mentioned, that it's very important for youth to be involved, for instance, in organizations like Yongo, in the formation of the Global Youth Statement. You as a youth, if you know the importance of marine biodiversity, if you know how to protect those endangered species, you'll be able to bring your voice, into the Global Youth Statement, and it's going to be heard. So these are my points, and thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Petronella, for your inspiring word. It's really, I'm really joining a youth organization, and I really know the pivotal role that youth play in such organizations. So thank you so much. And it's really, I'm really honored to have you and have such inspired women in our panel and such motivational, inspiring panelists. Thank you all for joining us today. And now let's move to our dear audience. Wanna hear from you. Can share your perspectives or your questions, so don't hesitate, please.
Hi, my name is Zoe Swanson. I'm from Indiana University, and I'm here studying mangroves as a blue carbon source. So I was interested, what do you think that there is political will currently for using mangroves as a blue carbon source? And if not, how do you think we can increase that?
Hi, thank you so much for that question. Live, laugh, love mangroves. Mangroves are the best. Mangroves sequester so much carbon. So we would definitely want to make sure that we are protecting and restoring mangroves, not destroying them, right? And so last year at COP28, there was a really significant initiative launched called the Mangrove Breakthrough. And so there are these different initiatives championed primarily by the UN high-level climate champions, such as the Coral Reef Breakthrough, the Ocean Breakthrough, and the Mangrove Breakthrough. And because we recognize how important it is for us to achieve action on those different pillars, they've created these initiatives as a mechanism to support the implementation. So they'll do things like set a specific financial target for how much money they look to raise to support the implementation of coral reef preservation and restoration, mangrove preservation and restoration. There's like 4 different pillars of the ocean breakthrough. So there's a lot in there. So I would look to the mangrove breakthrough because there already, I think, this might be wrong, so I apologize if this is not correct. 30 countries that have endorsed the mangrove breakthrough and are actively part of the Global Mangrove Alliance, which is the organizing body that's responsible for administering the financing, administering the technical assistance to parties to create plans to restore and protect their mangrove ecosystems. So I would say, with respect to mangroves specifically, the political will is there. In fact, a majority of countries who have blue carbon ecosystems mention them in their NDCs and the where they currently stand now. So even though there's still more progress to make, I would say that mangroves are actually one of the examples in adaptation, especially related to the ocean, that are the shining star for the progress that we can make. And I would recommend looking at organizations like the Global Mangrove Alliance and Pew, who are really responsible for coordinating that and administering that. In fact, the Global Mangrove Alliance and the Global Mangrove Breakthrough are the examples of how the other alliances and other breakthroughs should follow, because they're less organized. They haven't achieved as much progress yet either. So good question. That's my insights.
I would like to talk about something going on in South Korea right now. So South Korea is very working on mangrove restoration in Indonesia or Philippines related to the Article 6.2 and 6.4 and the carbon reduction transfer. And they want to, it's called the REDD Plus project, and it's related to both mangrove restoration and carbon transfer to South Korea in achieving the NDC goals. And in our school, there are a lot of work going on in the like technology part. So they're using the satellite technology. So if you look, the satellite can take a spectrum picture from the sky, and they can take a picture of mangrove forests. And by analyzing the kind of I'll say color, an easy way. If you analyze the color, you can examine the forest's health, and by using that, you can like reduce the cost of analyzing where we should focus on restoration of the mangrove forest. And this is very actively researched in the Red Plus initiatives and projects going on right now in South Korea. That was what I want to say.
Oh, thank you so much. There is other questions, please.
A little question for Petronella. Please don't worry if you don't have this data, just a curiosity. You were talking about biodegradable plastics in the ocean. If it has been demonstrated that maritime biodiversity, this biodegradable plastic is less damaging for animals in the long time. So because it degrades, or it is less damaging for the animals. Don't know if you have in mind that study or some data. Don't worry if you don't have in mind. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so biodegradable, I meant like biodegradable ways of packaging. For instance, you can have biodegradable packaging in terms of bags and also like bottles, because we know that this can easily be broken down. they are different from the actual plastics that we know, because plastics take thousands of years for them to break down. So that is a recommendation, like for us to move from the usual plastics that we use, in the packaging of food, specifically at beaches. Like when we go to the beach, we carry our plastic bottles, we carry our plastics, where we have food. But if we can move from those ways of packaging our food into biodegradable means of packaging our food, it will be good for the marine ecosystem. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your interaction. And as we are pressured by time, so I hope we have no other questions, right? I hope you have no questions. I hope you have no questions. Oh, okay. So as we are pressured by time, so let me share with you the keynotes of our panel. First, from Ms. Hemavati, we have adaptation strategies for agriculture. There are cases where plantation happens on a coastal areas and have to deal with salt water. The crops don't have ways to adapt. And Mr. Mark is a youth. He's a youth policy, creates a company and also joined some ocean initiatives. Also mentioned the role of ELCOI, ERCOI, and COIs. Says needs capacity building with young people to get involved with the UNFSS. Ocean and climate action says there are meetings per year to speak about ocean and climate action, and the reduction can be reached at 35%, and the work must be done on the ground. We need to change the dynamics with the nature, not thinking only that as a commodities. Resilience for communities. There are also vulnerable scientific approaches to get into the community especially related with biodiversity, forestry, and ocean. For communities, there are collaborative solutions with communities and academy. And our last panelist share about ocean at MENA will have the capacity to take carbon. It's important for youth to approach these spaces and help in protection of marine species like mangroves and young said, especially when fights against soil erosion. So thank you so much for joining us today, and let's join us for a picture